I'm joined once again for, I think, the final episode of her story, for the moment at any rate, by Samantha Baldwin. This is mostly going to cover the information that's come out in later periods after the main trials and family court hearings, information that's then come out and has been brought to the attention of authorities by Samantha, but not acted upon. There hasn't been a response. There hasn't been an appropriate response. Samantha, I think just before we get into all of that, there's one thing from previous interviews that you want to clarify.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify because it was pointed out to me, it wasn't clear. When my children were removed from my care in the brutal way, when the police raided the lodge that we were staying in and broke in the night, that wasn't for the judge's findings, which were the drugging and poaching of my children. That was for because I had lost custody of them because of these false findings, and the judge had then said I abducted my own children. I just wanted to clarify to people it wasn't for drugging my children, which I've never so much as been questioned for, never mind arrested, because it was my ex-husband who did that. He was arrested and questioned for that, but not me. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. So coming into what I've been able to gather, people having become aware of your case and the campaign that you've managed to run, even with injunctions and restrictions on what you can say, have been doing research. And this has brought a lot of information in. So perhaps you could take us through some of that. Yeah, sure. So it was recently brought to my attention about a song made by my ex-husband's band. The song is called Valium Sloth, and it's very, very sinister given the context of the boys' allegations against their father about being drugged and sexually abused by many people. So Valium Sloth is a song that when it was uploaded on there 2 years ago, but I believe it's an older song, and my ex-husband was in that band at the time. I don't know who's written the song, but the band wrote their own music. It's called Valium Sloth, which is obviously drugs. It's based on the English nursery rhyme Miss Polly Had a Dolly, which is well known in England. I'm not sure about other countries, but Google it anyway. I've also made a video on it. You can have a look at it on my channel. But it's called Miss Polly Had a Dolly. So the band kind of sing a bit of the chorus out of the original nursery rhyme, which is children's nursery rhyme. And then they start their own lyrics, which are extremely disturbing. And if you listen to it, there's child abuse, punishment, bondage, there's handcuffs, there's all kinds of disturbing. It even says about needle in my hand, when I think about the boys' disclosures, my eldest son's disclosures about being injected, it's kind of hidden in plain sight. Actually, I put it on Twitter, and Sonia Poulton's comment was that she was very disturbed by it, and that she used to be a music journalist, didn't she, I think? But she said she would want all the band members' computers checked. That's how disturbed she was.
It was disturbing indeed. I mean, the language, the brutal sexualized language in the context of children in a nursery rhyme was appalling. I mean, it was really, it wasn't just a little bit dodgy. It wasn't just a little bit off or suspicious. It was completely blatantly talking about child abuse. I thought that's what came across, and all of these themes that you mentioned, restraints and drugs and things, they're all in there. A very sick is really the only word you would say is really appropriate, piece of artwork. Yeah.
People have said, well, surely this would, they've got to look at this evidence. But I said, well, family court will probably make findings that I made the song. That's how ludicrous it is, isn't it? It really would. You know, I've been accused of other people's crimes. Why not? You know, they'd be like, right, well, you obviously made it. Where's the evidence? Well, no, we haven't got any. We've just got a strong suspicion that you made this. So yeah, it's that's the first thing that I've done an analysis of it on my channel anyway. It's got the original song on it as well. And
yeah, I'll put links in the description to all these to your channel and to anything else that's relevant that we're about to talk about. So I think that brings us to information about the judge, Jermy Lea,
yes.
Of which there have been one or two really quite striking bits of data have come in.
Yes. So first of all, I'll start with information which some people will already be aware of, but nevertheless, it's very telling and very important, this information. So Judge Lea so bearing in mind, he's a family court judge. He's making decisions about families. He's deciding which children should be taken off parents and being placed for adoption or fostering, or in my case, private law proceedings, which parent should care for the children, etc. So this man Judge Lea was also director of an adoption agency in Nottingham called Faith in Families. It used to be called Catholic Children's Society, but they changed the name so as not to put off gay people from becoming adoptive parents as well. So Judge Lea was director of Faith in Families between 2009 and 2012. During that time, he employed one of the workers there, was called Andris Loggins, sometimes known as Andy Loggins. And at that time, there were several complaints about this man from various sources, from children, from other social workers, and even from adoptive parents. They found him creepy, inappropriate, and making advances, that kind of thing. Anyway, this Andris Loggins was convicted of child abuse, of sexual abuse and physical abuse in the 1980s in Beechwood Care Home.
This is the Beechwood Care Home that Melanie Shaw blew the whistle on and revealed the nature of the abuse, which was everything up to and including murders, was her account, that happened in there in the same period. So this will be an area a lot of our viewers will have heard of, and a care home a lot of our viewers will have heard of.
Yeah, so yeah, it was that care home, which I think the judge just lives around the corner from, apparently. So this Andris Loggins, he was convicted in 2016 and he was sentenced for 20 years in prison. And anyway, so Robert Green, he found out online that Judge Lea did a fun run. He did a half marathon in 2011, and he was raising money for Faith in Families, and he had several people sponsoring him. I think only a handful of people, about 15, so just close friends and associates. One of which was Andris Loggins, who left a friendly message for him, encouraging him on his run today and sponsoring him. And so there's the link, friendly terms, close connection. And so obviously Judge Lea is a judge. He's meant to be a good judge of character, but he would have been aware of all these complaints about Andris Loggins at the time. There's been a 43-page document by ICSA all on Andris Loggins, so people can have a look at this. Judge Lea, another woman has also come forward saying about Judge Lea that he removed her 2 sons from her care and he placed them in the care of 2 men, and but allowed her to keep her baby daughter. So very sinister. And more to come about Judge Lea as well. He was he's actually been in the news twice this year, believe it or not, Judge Lea. One of them was for committing computer misuse, for logging onto a system illegally, of which he had no right, no legitimate reason to do so, and that was published in the Law Gazette. I think it might have even reached the mainstream news. But he was let off apparently due to mitigating circumstances. However, what I'd also like to to draw attention to is that he did this in my mum and my brother-in-law's case when they were charged with perjury. He actually added himself unlawfully to the system, to the digital system that their case was running from. They didn't know at the time that they could make a complaint about this, but I'd like to know what the mitigating circumstances was in that case, but it's appalling. And then he also appeared in the news for making a wrong decision. About contact for a woman with her children during the coronavirus lockdown, and he said that she couldn't have any contact, and it got overturned as being wrong. You know, when it's either wrong, there's either problem with the application of law, or it's a wrong decision. So that's the second reason why he's in the press this year. And yeah, so
and just for the viewers and listeners, the case where he was reprimanded over computer use, that we might not be able to describe exactly how, but that's also tied in to your case and your children's case. That's part of the same series of trials that surround what's happened, and
yes,
and attempts by various people to raise the alarm or protect your boys.
Yes, yeah. Well, a witness came forward with an allegation that he says he witnessed the abuse of my youngest son. This was at the beginning of 2019. He applied via my solicitor to have this heard in court. So after reading the document, I said, I want to hear him give evidence in my case. And this was going to happen. And apparently he turned up into court, and then he was swiftly arrested because he was wanted apparently for the harassment of Judge Lee, for which the case we were just talking about, the computer misuse of Judge Lee logging onto the system. So instead of the judge saying to the police, well, let him give evidence and then you can arrest him, she just let him be arrested without hearing his evidence first.
So there's a man's coming to court to say, I physically saw your ex-husband abuse one of your children. So again, we've got the forensic evidence, eyewitness account, and he was arrested in the court building. Yes,
apparently. I didn't see, but apparently he was arrested in the court building. Yes, in Nottingham Crown Court. It was taking place in, even though it was a family.
It's astounding. It really is. It's so blatant.
I know. Another thing that was astounding is when I heard about this allegation that involved my youngest son. Because of what was described, I then contacted the police and asked them to test both of my son's hair for drugs. I contacted them at the beginning of 2019. So at that point, I hadn't seen my sons for well over a year. And I sent them all my scientific evidence to prove that it wasn't me who drugged them. I sent through the boys' disclosures, but particularly my eldest son, saying who did it. And I also sent them the scientific evidence, the polygraph tests. I sent them loads of information and even did a graph to show it was impossible, the judge's theory as to the timing of the administration of the drugs. And they could have easily have just organised for my sons to both have hair samples taken, which is just a small bit of hair from underneath the head. They would have been in and out, and they said no. They said, we believe that.
And your request was prompted by this eyewitness testimony, because the eyewitness testimony said that your son was unconscious at the time.
That's right.
So there is, I mean, there's not a lack of evidence. The problem here is not a lack of evidence. There is evidence of the most solid and dependable kind everywhere, and yet it's ignored, or there's a refusal to gather it. So this was a case where you had eyewitness account that says the abuse is ongoing and the drugging's involved. You went to the police and said, can we have a hair sample? and the police, no. Did they give any reason?
Yeah, they sent a letter back saying it's been investigated by the family court, that they've done welfare checks, that they've spoken to social services. So I said, oh yes, the same social services who were told to believe the judge's false finding. Yes, they're very helpful. You know, so it was just, it was absolutely.
This is a strange thing. I've seen this before in less severe cases, but it's a pattern that once information's in the system's increasingly connected. So social work, talk to education, talk to the police, talk to housing, talk to everything, right? It's all one big connected, integrated state.
Yeah.
In Scotland, they gave it a name, the Scottish model of government, but it's called the fusion doctrine in England. It's everything's connected. Departmental boundaries no longer mean anything. Information's shared. And the reason given is, oh, well, people will fall through the cracks. And that's a bad thing. We need to make sure that we're protecting everybody. This is the justification the state gives for what it does. Now, what it actually in practice means is once there's wrong information into the system, there is no way of getting rid of it. Any mistakes are made, there's no checking process. It's like when DNA replicates as little bits of little engines on a molecular scale that go and check for copying errors. There's none of that in the system. It's incapable of correcting an error. So once there's an error is made, the entire system, police, social work, education, housing, benefit system, everything takes that mistake as gospel, as truth that cannot be questioned. And it doesn't matter how bizarre the error is. It doesn't matter how much evidence the individual has got to say, well, that's clearly insane. That makes no sense. That's incoherent. That's not rational. Here's all the evidence that says that's wrong. They're ignored. And we've seen this in large ways and smalls, from people having serious child protection concerns raised over nappy rash, I kid you not, up to your case being at the very worst end of the range. But the attitude of mind is the same. It's, we cannot contest what it says in the file. The file is absolute. And there is no thinking that goes on. It's very strange.
Yeah, there's no room for independent thinking. It's all just that mindset. It's all cognitive dissonance, isn't it? And it's absolutely terrifying. And you just think, how am I going to get out of this? It's like being stuck in a well and no way out. And just hoping that someone else will come forward or whatever. It's talking of which, someone has come forward, not about my ex-husband, although hopefully that will happen. But I've had a whistleblower coming forward about Judge Jermy Lea. But to protect her identity, so basically she was involved in a civil court case with a very good friend of Judge Lee's. And she has seen evidence in the form of an email that, well, he says he asked for advice to Judge Lea, as is a judge. He's also a criminal judge, not just a family court judge. And he is a circuit judge, so he's not a lower level judge. He's a circuit family court judge and he's a criminal judge. So this was his advice. He said, say whatever you want, make it up, and then in capital letters, lie, !
So the judge said to his friend how to handle himself in court, say whatever you want, make it up, lie. So that's, now, I point out that we can't go into details to protect the whistleblower here, but I've spoken to this lady, and She gave me all the background as to how this information came into her possession. She is extremely credible, very consistent in what she says, and this is also what she's told me, that this is the advice that Judge Jermy Lea was giving his friend as to how to handle himself in court. Say whatever you want, make it up, lie. It's astonishing that a judge would say that. It's quite, to anyone brought up with a conventional view of what the judge is, you know, steady, stoic, dependable, truthful, it's the very opposite of all of that.
Yeah, it's staggering. It's extremely sinister, and it leaves a big question mark over Judge Lee's character. And this is the man who has made a decision that has basically ruined my children's childhoods and puts them at risk of death because they've been drugged. Children have died from being administered these drugs, and they are living with a paedophile who drugged them and allowed others to do so. This is Judge Lee's decision. This is what he's done to my children. This unscrupulous man who encourages people to commit perjury in court.
I would like to come back briefly to the Cathy Fox blog, and I'll post this in the show notes for this episode. I was completely blown away by the information contained in this, of the eyewitness testimony of a child, which turns out to be your youngest, being abused by your ex-husband, and the person with this evidence came to the authorities. Do you know where that person is now?
He's in prison.
He's in prison.
For 20 weeks, yeah. And I know that for a fact because I rang up because I'd heard off someone on Twitter that he had a sentence in, so I rang up to find out. So yes, he was.
And in prison for what?
Harassing Judge Lee. Apparently there was pictures taken or a video of Judge Lee pulling his blinds down, and there was a video that was released by him stating that he was aware of allegations of child abuse in the 1990s against Judge Lee. So he is now in prison for that, which doesn't seem like, you know, any one of us could go and take a picture outside someone's house and say that publicly say that they're aware of allegations against someone, but would they go to prison unless it was a judge?
Yes, this is like, again, I mean, the fact that someone goes there with allegations of child sexual abuse, I'm an eyewitness, he gets arrested in the courthouse, not allowed to give evidence, and he now finds himself in jail for harassing the judge who handed over the children to the abuser. It's, I mean, it looks dirty on the face of it, but there's something else as well. When someone is a judge is making decisions over people's lives, and those decisions are going to come in for some criticism, those decisions are going to come in for scrutiny, there is surely an expectation that that judge, that man or woman, will be more than normally robust in standing by the decision. I mean, no one threatened anybody, you know. It's a photograph outside someone's house and a YouTube video. I think that the expectation is that the judge would be sufficiently thick-skinned as a professional requirement to let a good deal of that bounce off him, because otherwise, how could he make difficult and controversial decisions unless he was able to take some criticism and pushback over it? But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing that the judge is treated as an extra specially sensitive little flower that needs the full force of the law to protect them. It's the same way that a police officer is expected to be even more resilient in the normal course of events than an ordinary member of the public of average fortitude.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so when someone mouths off or something and said, you know, swears or something, they're not going to get all upset over this because they're expected to be able to cope with that. It seems odd that a judge is not going to be expected to cope with a certain amount of criticism, and people making this get 20 weeks in prison. It doesn't seem like justice. It doesn't seem credible to me. And again, it's the system is ignoring willfully, it would seem, all of the evidence. And this, you know, to close this, I would just like people to reflect on this fact. You have detailed and excellent and repeated statements from your children saying who abused them and how. And all of it points to the father and the father's family and the father's network of friends and acquaintances. They've been completely consistent. You've seen the tapes. The police did the interviews. It's not a secret. That information is there. They reported drugging. You've got forensic evidence that shows date rape drugs, benzodiazepines in the hair samples, and the position in the hair samples showing that drugging took place over a long period of time. So you've got rock solid forensic evidence.
Yes.
And you've got an eyewitness account of the abuse.
Yes.
Any system that had a reasonable ability to produce justice on correct error would see that and would say that is an overwhelming amount of evidence. Right? This is not, we're not talking about your belief. We're not talking about a bitter ex-wife or whatever other stories people might try and spin. We're not talking about this, about belief systems which are not rational on your part. We're talking about the hardest of hard evidence.
Yeah.
And it's all ignored. And this is why I think your case and these interviews are so important, because it shows a couple of vital things that people need to understand, that the system is profoundly broken and is incapable of providing justice in at least some cases where certain influences and certain hidden powers are in control. And also any suggestion that the sort of abuse that the ICSA child abuse inquiry is investigating is a thing of the 70s or the 80s or the 90s and isn't going on now is shown to be completely false by your story, because the cover-up of abuse that you're experiencing, that your children are experiencing, is every bit as egregious as anything that ICSA has thrown up, and yet it's happening now. And the authorities are incapable of seeing it. Who knew? We didn't know. Oh, lessons have not been learned.
No.
Nothing's been learned. It's happening now. It's happening to you.
Yeah. This judge has gone over and above. It's almost like he has a vested interest. I haven't said yet the extent of what he did. So not only did he remove my children and give them back to a child abusing father who drugged them and allowed others to abuse them, he also allowed them to sue me. So I was sued by the father. So bearing in mind that my court case cost over £150,000, he also allowed the father and two of the abusers who intervened in the case to sue me. I haven't got that money, but he allowed them to sue me for a total of £130,000. And in addition to that, he also froze my bank account, which still remains unfrozen. There's a bit of money in there, not much. I owe it to child tax credits because that continued for some months before I cancelled it, but it would go straight to my ex-husband if I applied to have it unfrozen. So that is the extent of what. And he also had the judgment sent out to various agencies, including the Mayor of Manchester, including particular named abusers. He had it sent out to them. And he also had it sent out. My mum had she was a successful counsellor, she had her own business. He also had it sent to the board of, because she was brought into this false finding because it said mother and or grandmother drugged the children, blah, blah, blah. They sent it to the, what's it called? The Counselling Practitioners Board or whatever, that she used to be a member of. It's just what they try and do to destroy your lives. It's just horrific, but it's like Judge Lee.
This is yeah, the reason this is done is to prevent you having any access to the law to defend yourself. So if they give you, not only take every penny, but give you extra debt on top of that and remove the ability to earn any reasonable sums of money, it means that you have, and obviously they control access to legal aid, it means that you have no access to the courts.
Yes.
It's done intentionally to prevent you fighting back legally.
Exactly. Well, I had to, when I appealed the arson, I had to represent myself, and then it immediately got rejected because I didn't have a clue. And that's because I refused to have my bank account unfrozen. They would have given me the legal aid had I unfrozen that, but I refused to because it would have gone straight to him. And I thought, he's not having anything else of mine, that is. So if I do ever want to have it unfrozen, that little that I do have in there will just go straight to him, apparently. Well,
Samantha, I want to thank you very much for this series of interviews. It's been stunning. It's been harrowing, and I know that the viewers and listeners will join me in thanking you for your courage and your precision and your calmness under all of this, and to wish you every success in resisting and fighting this, and at the end of the day in prevailing and rescuing your sons, who will shortly be of an age where they will be able to find out their own history and all the work you have done to try and protect them in the most difficult circumstances, with the entire power of the state arrayed against you for speaking truthfully about what your children had told you, and for standing up for their rights to have a happy life free from pain and suffering and abuse. So for all of these things, Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.